This is Shipping and Handling. My name is Josh Gregory, and today I have roped in Giovanna Terry to help join us, if you want to say hi.
Hi, everybody.
And then the guest of honor for today is Hanz Fequiere here. So, Hanz, you are the owner of First Responders EMS in Georgia, and also a restaurant, and also a home health facility coming up too.
Yes.
So we're going to get back to the restaurant and the home health. I want to hear about that. But EMS business, I assume that's emergency medical services. So are you a doctor, or what does an EMS business mean?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Giovanni. Thank you again. EMS is emergency medical service, and no, I'm not a doctor.
Okay.
I'm not even a college graduate. But, I was a firefighter for years, and I got into the EMS service through being a firefighter.
Okay.
So, yeah. And now my company was First Responders, and we changed the name back in 2020 to Constant Care EMS.
Okay, so
Yes.
you had a name pivot during COVID. Is that kind of the genesis of that?
Yeah, it was more like a tribute to my mother that passed away around that
Okay.
time. So she was the one constant in my life. And
Okay.
I was like, constant,
Yeah.
I'll call that. So it's the new constant in healthcare.
Okay, so firefighter though, was that your first career? Was that your dream to be a firefighter? How'd you end up there?
No, I needed a job. I was in the mortgage business back in 2000,
Okay.
and everyone knows about the real estate hit back in 2007. And so I went to the fire academy in Florida.
Okay.
But in Florida, once you get into the fire academy, it's like an extremely long waiting list. Like, to become a firefighter in Florida, you have to first sign a letter of interest. Like, hey, I'm interested in doing this. And then they put you on a waiting list for 2 years.
Okay.
And so throughout that time, I was a mortgage broker, and I worked as a manager at a Sprint PCS store.
Yeah.
And while I was doing mortgages, a lot of my clients relocated to Georgia. And I was like, wow, it's beautiful. It's a fresh start. So I purchased a house in Georgia and applied at fire departments. And I literally closed one day because I didn't know how I was going to make any money.
Yeah.
I closed on a Friday and got a job offer on a Monday.
Okay.
So
you completely abandoned the Florida firefighter dream.
Yeah, it was taking way too long.
Yeah, I had no idea there was any kind of letter of interest or process. I thought that was just something you could go sign up for, and they took volunteers. So
Yeah, I wish I would have still been
Yeah.
there, but no. It was like 2 years. I think I was on the list for almost 3.5 years.
Oh, geez.
And this is different departments.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, actually, I applied for Miami Beach, or South Beach, right? And they had so many applicants that they had to hold the orientation at the convention center. And the fire chief stands up and says, we have good news and we have bad news. The good news is this is a great turnout. The bad news is we're only hiring 6.
Oh,
Oh,
man.
wow.
So you're welcome to get up and like half of us.
Oh, man.
That's how difficult it was getting
Yeah.
hired in Florida. So
Okay, well that's
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
So
And
then you ended up in Georgia?
Georgia was like, hey, we need you, let's go. I was like, really? Is this a trick?
Yeah, no letter of interest. I'm
No.
ready to go tomorrow. Okay.
No, yeah, it was just like apply, interview, done.
Okay.
I was
So
like loving
you
it.
jumped right into firefighting. Did you give up on the mortgage side and went straight to full-time firefighting after that?
Yes, because the process to become a mortgage broker in Georgia is a lot different too. So you had to be a broker. In Florida, I could work as a loan officer. And so it was just heaven sent the way it worked out. And I got hired with the fire department, just went through training for 6 months. And then I had to go to EMT school after graduating as a firefighter.
Okay, so you are required to be an EMT, or is that just something you wanted to do?
That was something that department actually, it was a requirement. Because the reality is in most fire departments throughout the United States, 95% of our calls are EMS. You might see us train a lot in like how to roll a hose and fight fire, but 95% of our calls are all medical.
Okay, so that's why there's always firefighters at like everything. Even if there's not a fire, I still see the fire truck.
Yes, yeah, because
Okay.
we're all like EMTs or paramedics.
Okay, so that's basically like the spare EMTs that get added, or if there's one ambulance and then they always add, a few from the fire trucks, that's kind of the reason for it?
Yeah, definitely, and especially if it's like someone's having a cardiac arrest, the ambulance will go, but the fire trucks are going as backup because we're doing CPR. There's just a lot of moving parts, so they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, I guess I don't think I realized how much.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
I thought they just always assumed that there might be a fire at any car accident.
Yeah,
They'd be like, heart attack, might be a fire too, take it.
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
I really think that's how I just internalized it for a long time.
Yeah.
But so because of that, you were already starting to see some of the medical side. Is that kind of how
Yeah.
you got a taste of it?
Yeah, and that's what I gravitated to. Like a lot of my buddies from the fire department, they were second, third generation firefighters. This was just something I just needed to do. But the redundancy of like just the training for something that might happen, which I understood why it was so important, because it could be that one call where you lose your life, but just dealing with like a different person where you might have a broken leg and you might be, with the EMS side, it's just always something different. So I just gravitated to that more than the fire.
Yeah. What were the hours like as a firefighter? I can't remember like what you had to do there either.
Now that was one of the great things. It was 24 on and 48 off. So you get in 7 a.m. in the morning, you don't leave till 7 a.m. the next day. But then you're off for 2 days.
Okay.
So that was the pretty cool thing. We worked like 120 days out of the year.
Okay.
But a lot of us can't really afford firefighters don't make a lot of money, so we'd leave one job and go right to the next. So you're off one day probably.
Yeah. So you've got time off for your second job.
Exactly. That was it. Yeah, firefighters have like the third highest divorce rate. Because we are never home.
Never see your family, or on the days off, like your wife or significant other is working. So it's
exactly, just always. And that was the one thing my chief said at graduation. He asked all the wives to stand up. And he said, look, I want you guys to know you have to be supportive.
Okay.
And he mentioned that statistic.
Okay, I thought you were going to say he stood them up and said, sorry, half of you are going to be gone in a year.
Yeah, that would have been hilarious. He kind of, he said, look, we have the highest divorce rate. So kind of sort of said that. And so a lot of people, they'll spend like their birthdays for their kids at the fire station because we can't get off. It's like just a very weird dynamic for me. And
it's a big sacrifice.
That is huge. Yeah. It's huge. So
you're looking to pivot. And so what was the immediate next step, EMS, or like how did you get into that?
You know what? When I was on the fire truck, I didn't even know as a firefighter that you can own an EMS company privately.
I certainly didn't.
Most people don't know that.
Most people don't, right? You're absolutely right. So can you imagine I'm in the fire department? I didn't know that. I just thought it was all government regulated or regulated by a major hospital.
Yeah.
And so I knew that the fire department wasn't my end goal, right? Just because I was blessed enough to always just be in the entrepreneurial spirit. So even when I was in rookie school and I learned how to, do accounting. And so I was doing taxes. And one of my first clients was James Dame. He was my tax firefighter buddies. And he's like, I'll let you try. And I was like, all right, great. And so he let me do his taxes and it just spread like wildfire. So I just looked at this as my crystal ball into the future because I'm doing taxes for my lieutenants and chiefs. And I'm like, I got to work here for this long to make that much money. Right there, I knew, well, this is not for me. So I left like 9 years in. And the only reason I did that is because like I was very liked and, I knew there was a promotion in the horizon. But again, I got to see what promotions would get me.
Yeah.
And then you're weighing like, I'm going to make an extra $200, but the time for my family, this is not working out, right? So they all said, when I told them I was leaving on my 9th year, they tried to talk me in. I was like, yeah, but if I stay for 10, then you guys are going to tell me, no, stay for 15. If I stay for 15, 20, now I'm stuck.
Yeah.
So my 9th year, I just gave my 2 weeks notice. I was like, I'm sorry, guys. It was good while it lasted. And I burnt every bridge I could burn. And I just kept the EMS because I knew I could get a job there. Okay. But what can you do with a firefighter certification?
Yeah.
There's nothing outside of arson for a big insurance company. But outside of that, you could just go to another fire department. It's like a lateral move. But there's nothing in corporate America or as an entrepreneur, I could take I know how to fight fires, So I was like, no, I'm going to keep the EMS and I let everything expire. All my firefighter certs, my arson. I intentionally did that. I was like, I don't even want to go back to this.
I mean, I hear you on that, but I think I am in the same camp as a lot of people where hearing that you have an EMT, I don't necessarily know where you would go with that either other than drive an ambulance. So what was your thought process? Had you already found that next step into owning it? Yeah,
because even as an EMT, one of my part-time jobs was working at the hospital. So I was in the ER because EMTs work at the hospital. And I worked at urgent care. Okay. So there were those other, sectors in healthcare that were available for EMTs, but not for firefighters, right?
Yeah.
So healthcare is always going to have opportunities out there. So I did that for a little while.
Yeah, see, I think that's just not a concept I'm familiar with at all in terms of healthcare always having opportunities. I think of it as, are you a nurse? Are you a doctor? I know there's things like PAs, but other than that, I mean, this seems like a really difficult thing to break into. Was that a hard next step there?
It wasn't really for me when it comes to the marketing, right?
Okay.
And so when I left the fire department, I was looking for another job. And I saw a friend of mine on Facebook. She had a uniform. I'm like, hey, where do you work? And she said, I work for a company called General Care.
Yeah.
And she's like, but they only have one patient. And I was like, well, I don't really need the money. I just kind of need something to do. Because my wife's like, you can't stay home playing video games all day. So I was like, all right, so let me go. And I spoke to the owner, and literally he was like one couch in his office, one ambulance. And I was like, and he said, I don't really have anything but one patient. I said, listen, let's work a deal out. If I help you get patients, show me the management side of this. And it worked because I literally hit the streets and I was marketing to every social worker. I found out what every private EMS company can solicit to, right?
Okay.
Who can we, who are our services good for, right? And once I realized they're not doing 911, because this was brand new to me, just like how it's to anyone. Like, okay, well, we don't do 911. Well, who do we service? And he's like, well, right now we're just doing dialysis and wound care. I was like, all right, great. So I Googled all the dialysis and wound care centers, and I just started marketing to them with all my background in mortgage broking, just because as a mortgage broker, you have to find your clients, right? I didn't work for like a Wells Fargo or Bank of America. I worked for an independent mortgage company. So I had to go look for clients every day. And so I just took that mentality and promoting nightclub mentality where it wasn't Instagram. I know you're like, how old are you? Like, I was marketing during the age of flyers.
Hey, I'm not that young. I know how to go outside of Instagram.
Okay, great. So you understand, we had it rough.
I don't even think we talked about that. You promoted nightclubs? So was it with
Yeah,
flyers?
Yes. I just partied so much I got tired of paying. This is a part of me, Josh. This is where the gray hairs have a story to them. And so I just I'm going to stop paying to go to nightclubs. And so I just asked one of the owners, I was like, can I just promote? Okay. And he's like, here's a box of flyers. And one time I actually promoted for one of the Dolphin players, Louis Oliver.
Okay, yeah.
And what he would do is he would pay me to pass out his flyers, but he would follow me. And this is why I knew, this is why I learned integrity and honesty in business. Because he would say, hey, Hans, or back then they called me Solo, right? So, hey, Solo, where are you at? I'm like, well, I'm on 10th and Collins on Ocean, South Beach. And then I would see his limo pass by because a lot of people would take flyers and just throw them away. And he would make sure I was doing my job. So right there, I was like, okay, I'm going to always make sure that I do things with integrity and honesty. And so I started passing out flyers. And a lot of people, pretty girls would take my flyers. I don't want that and throw it in my face. Like, I got so many no's, I got immune to it. But
I mean, that's a skill in and of itself, getting immune to the no's.
That's hard.
So it's like, look, the worst thing someone could say is, no, okay, it doesn't feel that bad. I'll deal with that. So I just went back to that mindset and went to social workers and said, hey, I'm promoting a ambulance company that's new, but we care a lot about the patients. Of course, I had my own story that was relatable to the social workers or whoever was in charge of transportation. My parents were both on dialysis at one point. And so before they passed away, so this was before my dad was on dialysis. So I would say, hey, I understand the severity. I understand the urgency of getting transportation here. This is my story. So having that relatable story to the social worker or the charge nurse or whoever was in charge of transportation just opened doors for me. And so that company grew from 1 patient to 20 patients in 3 months. So you're looking at, just ideally they were making like $5,000 a month to $100K. And I'm like, wow. And I'm still making $20 an hour for them. My negotiating skills were horrible back then.
I feel like it's easier to relate to maybe a dialysis patient than just a stranger on the street promoting a nightclub. It's easier to make that human connection for sure.
Definitely. And I went to where those patients were, right? It's not like on South Beach, you're probably marketing people that aren't even interested.
Right.
But I knew where the interest was, so that made it easier.
Yes.
And then having the family story just made it relatable. But again, I just was so happy that I did it. But then when I saw how much money, they were like buying new trucks. And I'm like, I negotiated just for a manager's position. Like, this is horrible.
Wait a minute. It's not adding up here.
Not at all. Not at all.
I know that you guys are doing a good job with the business, but this business didn't exist before me. So.
And it was so bad, Josh. I did everything with a handshake. Man, I'm telling you, my wife was kicking me in the butt. I don't know. At that point, you want to get your foot in the door. So it's like, okay, cool. And, it's not, you don't developed the business acumen. Like I think in entrepreneurship, it happens through time and trial and error and stuff like that. And I don't even think it's error. I think it's through trial. You learn and then you apply that. So of course I handle that differently now, but back then it was like, he's coming in with a new car. I'm like, wait, what is going on? But I didn't even know the numbers and I wasn't mindful enough to even ask, like, well, how much do you guys get paid per patient? Like, then I would have negotiated differently.
Right. Yeah.
But in healthcare, thank God that it's such a big community, but everybody kind of knows each other. So word got out of what I've done and accomplished. And so I worked for another company and helped them grow. But then I went in like, hey, no, I want this per patient. So it was more, a better negotiating for me back then. So I worked for another company called Life EMS and helped them grow. And then by the time I got to the third company, some other guy recruited me and he was like, hey, I want you to work for me. And I was like, I don't want to work for anyone no more. I see what you guys are doing. Can we do a partnership? And he was like, no, but I'll get you your own office. And I was like, there's always a thought or a red flag that goes up when someone tries to keep you underneath them. And so that was like, no, you know what? I'll pass. I see what I can do. And I'm going to do it for myself. So then I bought my first truck from like a title agency. It was horrible. So that was the story. That was the beginning of First Responders, now Constant Care.
So that was kind of the journey. Now, before we talk more about kind of how Constant Care evolved, one of the things that I think I still want to make sure I understand is you said, we said, emergency medical service, first responders, EMS is what it was originally called. But then earlier you said, we don't have to do emergency calls. We can just do dialysis or wound care. So can you kind of paint the picture for me of the different kinds of things that you would do in this business, the different kind of services? And then also, if it's not emergency, I know you said dialysis, but are you still in an ambulance? Like, what does it all mean?
And that's a great question because a lot of times, like, I had to learn this as well, right? Because my background is in emergency medical service, right? So you have to think every time the bell rang at the fire department, it's a 911. But now I'm entering this industry where the same ambulance can be used for non-emergency and strictly non-emergency. So this is where people, and like I said, I got confused at first. We have an emergency medical service, an ambulance. So if you look inside my ambulance, it's identical to an ambulance at a fire department or a major hospital.
Now, is that a standard?
Yes.
Is that has to be across the board?
Yes. Okay. It's a licensing standard depending on if you're going BLS or ALS, which is basic life support, or ALS, which is advanced life support. And the only difference with that is if you have medication, then you're most likely ALS. And if you have the 12 lead, which they put the 12 lead on your body to make sure, your heart's okay and everything. And those are really the two major differences. And then you have to have a higher skilled person, which is a medic, on an ALS truck. But for the most part, it's exactly the same. We have a BLS truck. And so what we do is we're licensed as an emergency medical service, but we only cater to non-emergency medical patients.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Kind of.
It does. Give me some more examples of what a non-emergency medical patient is.
Definitely. Anyone who really cannot walk. Someone who's on dialysis, who's had a stroke in the past, maybe an amputee, double amputee, and in some cases, someone who can walk, but they have dementia or something, someone who might be a flight risk, and you have to strap them on a stretcher. But for the most part, it's someone who's going to a doctor's appointment for a particular procedure. So they're not necessarily deemed an emergency, but they're having an operation done or a procedure done on a daily basis or weekly basis. And they just can't walk, so they need a stretcher to accommodate them. And maybe more than one person to help them get from the stretcher to the hospital bed.
Okay. So that's the difference between maybe an ambulance in that situation rather than just like a transport van that is specifically for non-emergency services, is that room to kind of do what they need to do for the patient.
Yeah, that's it. And just to really clarify, you do have the non-emergency transportation companies, right, which are wheelchair vans. Okay. So that's someone who's probably going to the doctor just to do a checkup on their blood pressure or to find results out. Now, they probably need assistance walking, but they're better suited for a wheelchair van.
Okay.
So what we do with the ambulance is for someone who cannot walk at all. They're non-ambulatory in the medical field, right? So they definitely need two people to lift them up and put them onto the chair or the hospital chair or the dialysis chair or the bed, hospital bed.
Okay.
They cannot. So the way that Medicare will define it is if you were to have a patient and leave them home alone, and if their house was to catch on fire, can they get out? And some people on a wheelchair actually can, and some people
Right.
cannot, right? They have no real use of their arms, their upper extremities, and they need help getting up. So we use that to clarify or to verify if we're going to take a patient with us. And we know that this patient's not capable of getting up. Like I have a patient now who's left side paralysis. He cannot, he can probably do this. You definitely know he cannot get out of a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So he's a stretcher candidate. Now, but we transport him to dialysis. So it's nothing emergent. It's not an emergency,
Right.
but he needs that assistance every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to go to dialysis.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
a
So-
very interesting clarification.
Yeah.
I have never ever even thought about the difference in what that might look like for, what they need.
Yeah, and also we do not just dialysis, but wound care, hospice. We do sporting events, So the private ambulance sector can be used for a lot of different things.
Movie
I have
sets?
never ran a 911 call in my life.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Do you do movie sets?
Yes, we
That's
do.
super
I did all the Avenger movies,
Okay.
and we just sit there, stand by. And the best thing about those contracts are they usually have their own doctor or their own medic, but they have to have a ambulance company there. So we're just sitting back eating food and watching
all the action unfold.
I watched my first stunt and I let my employees do the rest. But I went to the first one that we were contracted
yeah.
to because it was like a car scene and it had to jump off a ramp. And I was like, oh no, I'm going for this one.
Yeah, you'd have to kick me out of that.
Yeah.
ambulance.
Yeah.
I'd be there every
Yeah.
day.
It was pretty awesome. And then usually my employees are sitting in the truck. They give us a radio. We're on our iPads watching a movie, or I tell them if they want to watch the movie, just stay out the way. And it's pretty cool. And then we do a lot of large gatherings at parks, any parades. We're there. I just got a contract for FIFA that's coming to Atlanta.
That's
My
awesome.
company is doing the
Wow.
FIFA
Wow,
stuff. So
that's great.
Yeah, good stuff. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's super great. That's awesome. Wait, when is FIFA coming to Atlanta?
I think next year, 2025. I know that he texted me the other day and said, hey, can you provide 10 EMTs? I was like, definitely.
Yeah, I'll take that contract.
Yeah.
That's great.
And the great thing is that that actually brings up a point that even when you own an ambulance company, your money is not only made with the ambulance. You can contract your employees to do the movie sets or, FIFA, where, hey, we just need 2 trucks, but we need, 8 employees to walk the perimeter. And I'm like, oh, great. So those things can happen.
Okay, so you said you never do emergencies. Can you do emergencies?
You can, and it just depends on the district and the county. You would have to work and see if you can subcontract or work under the larger ambulance, because most counties have either the fire department. I have some mentees right now that are in DeKalb County, and they worked out a deal with DeKalb County to run all their BLS calls,
Oh, wow.
which is so great because the county's letting them park their ambulances at the fire stations.
Oh, that's nice.
And they just got licensed 3 months ago, and it's 2 sisters.
Wow.
And I think that's so awesome. And they're getting paid by the county.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be the normal dialysis and stuff like that. There's just so much opportunity for people. And they've never been in healthcare. One worked for Amazon, ironically, and the other one is a realtor. And they saw me on social media and they're like, hey, we want to learn how to open up an ambulance company. And now they're doing big things.
Now they're doing
Yeah.
it.
So you see it definitely more of an entrepreneurial journey rather than, because I'm coming from the perspective, my husband's a PA, so he's full medical field. Like you're saying, there's people who have absolutely no experience in the medical field, so it's not necessarily one or the other. It sounds like there's a lot of crossover in the opportunity there.
Yeah, the majority of people that I've helped, and I know we'll talk about it later, but it's been non-medical people. I think I have a
Yeah.
doctor and a couple of nurses that are starting an ambulance company, but one guy said he's a truck driver. Yes, another guy is a retired football player. So it's just people that love helping people,
Yeah.
and that's all you need. Like if that's your why, and you have a good passion to really help people, you'll be fine. You've kind of fit the majority of what you need to be successful in this.
And I think there's a lot of people who either wanted to be a doctor or have that desire to help people in that way, but don't see any kind of path into that industry. So it's really cool and interesting that this is something anybody could do.
Right.
Yeah, and one of the best, one of my fondest memories, I was at a bar, and I was just having casual conversation with the guy next to me. We was exchanging information, and he's like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I own an ambulance company. He's like, no, you don't. I'm like, no, I do own an ambulance company. He's like, you went to college? I was like, community college, but I left like a year in.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, well, you don't wait. Do you work for the doctor? And this is where I got him. I was like, no, the doctor actually works for me. And he's like, what? And I was like, drop the mic. Yeah. I'll buy their drinks. I'm out of here. You know.
Awesome.
But yeah, so it's crazy because the doctor actually does work for you as an independent contractor. So you can have still those aspirations of, you know, being this place without going to school and owing a lot in student loans. This has just been a way for me to help those people out that always wanted to be in healthcare, but either didn't have the time or the money. And now they can still impact their community and still hold a very high esteemed title as well.
Yeah. What does your like number of employees look like? Or if you have, is it kind of a certain number of employees per truck, or is it different depending on what you're doing? How does that look like?
Yeah, definitely. It's 2 employees per truck, right? And they have different levels of certification. So in most states, you can have an EMT basic, right? So there's 3 levels, an EMT basic, an advanced, and a medic. So the medic will be the highest level. But for what we do, 2 EMT basics are fine. So at my peak, I was at 22 employees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So first responders EMS to constant care, what's kind of been the journey of your business once you started owning and running it yourself?
Separation of partnership. I think first responders, I was with someone that I was like, we have different goals
visions.
and visions.
Yeah.
Let's just do our own thing. And now just the journey has been very humbling because it's like, that was my baby. Right? First responders was like, imagine you and I are best friends since 8th grade.
Yeah.
And now it's like, I bring you on because we had this 8th grade promise, you know, like whenever we find something out, we're going to help the other person get on. And you're like, well, this is mine now. And I'm like, what? You know, but nevertheless, it was humbling because I had to like literally start over. But the one thing that I learned from starting over was you're the business, right? And so even when we divided the company, I was like, okay, can't have the name, can't have the patients. And I realized whatever name you want to start, you have to really start over. But because I was so hands-on, my patients wanted to go wherever I was. So I realized I'm not losing anything. I just got to get new trucks. And I really worked that into my negotiation when I figured that out, that you're actually the business. And that's why I say, if you really care about people, you're going to be successful. Because I was able to start over and still just pick up where I left off. Like, nothing happened because it was just my clients were like, no, we're going where you go. And so that just was like, this is a good feeling. You know?
It's a great feeling.
Yeah.
Was it, now, when you think about, you said you're really hands-on, is this something where you think you should be involved every day in a business like this forever? Like, what does the time commitment look like for you as an owner?
I think, right now I'm not hands-on, but that's not a bad thing, right? It's like, I make my monthly calls to my clients and say, hey, how are you doing? Just making sure your service is good and everything. But I have someone now that I trust that he just runs everything for me. And so for the first year and a half, even when I started over, like the first time I started First Responders, I was there 6 days a week, but I was also passionate about it. So it was like I kind of loved what I did, right? It's like I never grew a business to that, amount. I never scaled a business that much before. And so that was like being proud to go to work every day and saying, okay, what's the new challenge? But then I realized after learning a little bit more about entrepreneurship and how to delegate, it was like, okay, what am I doing this for if I'm not spending time with my family, right? So learning how to delegate, learning how to create hybrid employees, which we've talked about, that allowed me to understand that I could still manage my business from afar. I don't have to be here because I put everything in place. So now I'm on an ambulance once every 6 months, and that's kind of like
just to do it.
just to feel the temperature of the room, right?
Or like for FIFA, you might go.
Yeah, no, I'm doing that one. You know, like, that's good content.
Boots on the ground every day. Like I am there.
I am never there. Like my guy Marvin calls me and he says, "Hey, this is what's going on," and we'll text, and we don't even see each other. That's one of my closest friends, but he runs my company, so it allows me to do other things. Like, no, it's not. Once you have the right system and you have the right person in place, you're there when you want to be. You know, I have a friend who has a company in Georgia, but he lives like part-time in Panama. So it's like, you know, it's the first year and a half to 2 years, you got to be there.
Yeah.
You don't want anything to just go over your head. You have to know what's going on. But after that, you should have systems in place where I say, if you're running your business, you're doing it wrong. If you're managing your business, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And that applies for, you know, just about any business.
Yeah.
It's so much of it is building the right brand and culture and structure so that even when you're not there, it can still be your business and still feel like you're running it. Like that's at the end of the day the biggest thing, right?
Yeah, that was perfectly said. That's the idea. That's the idea behind it. A year and a half in, you should have everything there.
Okay. So I know you've mentioned it a few times. So you built the business up. You've kind of freed up some time for yourself. It sounds like then you started helping others get into the same industry.
Well, that was the crazy thing. It was like watching, I guess, my firefighter friends, because I was on social media then.
Yeah.
They're like, you left the fire department. Usually when you leave the fire department, we go working at a hospital or something. And
That's what I'm thinking. It's like you got EMT. I guess that's the only place to go.
This is the rite of passage.
Yeah.
Trust me. Like every firefighter that leaves, they go into nursing school and they become RNs. Like that is the rite of passage. But I just saw this opportunity by helping other people. And then when I bought my first truck, and people just, I think people in the community saw the growth. So my friend who, actually Britt, the guy from Panama, right?
Yeah.
He was one of the first guys like, "Hey Hans, can you help me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna show you the process and the procedures, and here's my BLS protocols and all my protocols. Just input it here, get your truck." And he just took off. And then somebody else asked, and I'm like, there's something to this. I didn't charge people back then.
Yeah.
That was the worst. Again, my
handshakes.
Don't ask me for business advice back then. I didn't know what I was doing.
You said you're really like helping people, huh?
Right.
Okay.
That's
You can help
literally what
me.
happened.
Yeah.
You know, let's talk about it over dinner. I was just happy just being able to help
Excited about
someone.
it, right?
Yeah.
And then I just put a monetary value on it sooner or later because it was taking a lot of my time.
Yeah.
Where people like, okay, now we're seeing you because I was posting a little like, hey, my guy's on his ambulance. And then, I just started mentoring people like 2.5, 3 years ago. But the good thing about this was nobody I was mentoring was a firefighter. So I helped a lot of firefighters start EMS companies, but now it was like just the everyday person. It was like, hey, Britt called me and told me, you know, I'm trying to get out of trucking or I'm trying to get out of this, but I'm interested in this. I'm like, okay, 5,000. Back then, now like, what am I doing this to take it to? I was horrible. Now that I think about it, I was just like, oh my gosh.
You're doing whatever you can. You know, that's like you had time to help, but didn't necessarily have time yet to think about how to make that a business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I just saw the reward was really not the pay. And I think this is why I never really focused on charging people. But to hear people say, man, you changed my life, like, thank you. Or they'll send me a picture of their ambulance because they saw it on the expressway. And then I get excited when I hear their excitement. So that was like my reward.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, and I still get chills when my mentees like, oh my God, I just passed. I'm like, thank you, God. You know, another one in the books.
It's one of those where it's like, I know the answers and I know that I'm helping people, but am I really doing it right? But then you see their success, you see they get the first truck on the road. It's like that's that moment of validation and also just happiness for them.
And that is how I felt since I started.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, you hit it on the head. Even though I know I'm doing it right, it's like, everybody's different. But that's literally, if somebody could ask me, how did I feel while doing that? I'm like, I know I'm doing it right, but, and then when they get certified, I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Because they're putting so much trust in you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, thank you, God.
Yeah.
But then you're helping them get that baseline information so that whenever they are building the culture of their business and getting to the point where they are trying to do everything they can to then step away and let their business run itself, they can then add those personal elements that aren't necessarily taught, but more kind of learned along the way. So
yeah, and most of the successful people that are in this business have no EMS background. They have like a business background, and they come in and bring their own talent. And I always tell them, look, I started with dialysis wound care. you make it what you want to make it.
Right.
Make it your own, because the opportunities are endless in healthcare. So everybody finds their niche and they just go after it. Like the ladies that are just doing the fire department backup. So I was like, oh, that's pretty awesome. It was just it was a proud moment. Even, surpassing things that I've done. Like they're looking at things from a different set of lenses, where I'm firefighter, rite of passage, dialysis, wound care,
Yeah.
They're like, no, we're doing this and this, and we got a VA contract. I'm like, oh, teach me that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
That's cool that you can not only come from different backgrounds, but even entering the space, there's many different ways that you can take it. So sounds like there's just a lot of flexibility in the industry in general.
Yeah, and I don't even think I scratched the surface. I know I keep saying dialysis, wound care, hospice. There's the hyperbaric chamber. There is the IV place where you actually have to, I forgot what it's called, get your catheter changed. They ask for transportation. Of course, we said the parks, we said the events. You could run backup for 911.
Yeah.
You can do disaster relief for FEMA. So there are just so many ways that you can make money.
Going
Yeah.
back to the 911 calls and maybe disaster relief. So is it one of those things where if you say you're going to do it, you have to do it every single time, no matter what? If they call, you have to be there.
You have to commit.
Okay.
And for example, again, the young ladies called me and they were like, just yesterday, like, well, we need your advice because the hurricane's coming.
Yeah.
And the Department of the Cobb County Fire said, "Are we available?" I'm like, "You better be available. You already signed that contract."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just signed that contract.
And then she's
yeah.
like, "Well, do we have to be available for the whole day?" I was like, "Yeah."
Yes,
Like,
you
does
do.
that? Hurricane's not going to wonder what time are you guys ready.
Right.
So once you do that, you do have to be available. An example for like the FEMA for REDS, right? And they will give you a certain number and they'll page you. And once you put yourself on the availability list, so with FEMA, you have to literally say, I have 3 trucks available and 6 personnel. And of course, hopefully you've asked your guys, are you ready to go out of town, right?
Right.
And so once your employees say, yes, I want to get deployed, you send them this list and they'll say, hey, Josh, we need 2 of your trucks and 2 medics and 2 basics. And you go through your list and you send them. But you have 24 hours to respond. And they will always, for the most part, send you to somewhere other than the state that you're located in. And so, because they're assuming that, that state, their resources already absorbed. So they're going
Right.
to call people from other states. And so, you have to respond. You can't say, hey, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they pay you so well. It's like $200 an hour
Right.
from the time you leave your office to whatever state you're going to. And it's while you're sleeping until you get back. So it's like, oh my gosh, you're praying to get.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. That pros and cons, those pros are looking pretty nice.
Yeah.
It's an incentive for your employees. They love it because they get a pay raise. They get to eat for free. They get free lodging. It's
Yeah. Now, do you think that those are often enough to where that is kind of the only operation that they might run, or is that kind of supplemental to anything else that they might do
I
on
think
a
it's more
daily basis?
supplemental.
Okay.
I know companies that were paged to different places, but I have never done it. It's like the lotto
Yeah.
sometimes, and it's like weird because you're not hoping for a storm, but you're kind of like, well, category 5, shall we? It's like bad, but you're like, once that pager goes off, your heart goes back to doing the right thing. You don't even think about the money. You're like, okay, people need me.
Right.
It's fire department, right? We get paid, but once that bell rings, you're not thinking, you're like, oh, I gotta go.
Yeah, when you're thinking about it, I know it's sometimes we can make light of it, but this is an industry where ultimately, in some ways, you profit when people are sick. But really, this is something. What I'm hearing from you and kind of the motivation for a lot of people is that this is a need and a gap to help people who really have no other option to get to the hospital or to have this transportation. And so you're filling that need for your community. And I think that's really admirable. And probably a motivation for a lot of people in this industry to stay in it.
Yeah, and it's if you don't recognize the need, the community will let you know.
Yeah.
Right? So once you put on a uniform and your uniform says Josh's EMS service, you could be at Chick-fil-A and somebody's going to walk up to you and say thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
And so they'll remind you how important you are to the community. And so it's not, and even with my employees, I always tell them, like, do what's right and I'll take care of you. Like, don't worry about your pay. We're going to work. Everybody's going to be fine, but make sure you do what's right because then we'll be successful. And that's really it. If you have that as like your core, like I have to take care of someone's mom, someone's son, if that is your core of why you're doing it, then you'll be fine. You can't ever forget that in this business. And like I said, I was blessed to even transport my parents in my own ambulance.
Wow.
So that was...
That had to be kind of a full circle special moment of like scary, but knowing
like a
that you're the person
bittersweet-
who could do it.
Yeah, and it was coming, and one of my employees and I was coming from a long 12-hour shift, and it was like 4:30, and my mother called me and said my dad was on the floor laying down, and I'm like, okay, well, just get him up. You know, you're not.
Yeah.
But I could tell something wasn't right with my mother because my dad was on the floor at 9:30 in the morning. Well, you remember I told you it was 4:30 when she called me again.
Oh, man.
So I'm like, wait, Mom, Dad's been on the floor since 9:30 this morning. So right there, that doesn't only tell me something's wrong with him, something's wrong with her. And she had a prior history of stroke. So I'm calling, I told my my employee, I was like, look, I know you're getting off, but I need a favor. Something's happening at my parents' house. And they were like 5 miles down the road. You know, I'll pay you overtime. He's like, don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
Let's go. So we booked it there. My mom was having another stroke and my dad was having an internal bleed. So it was like, grab the stretcher, go upstairs, take my dad, put my dad on one side of the bed, go back upstairs, grab my mom, and we literally code 3 is lights and sirens to Atlanta Medical.
Yeah.
And that was like great at the same time, like you said, bittersweet, because I was able to control the narrative for my parents. I was able to do the blood pressure, start the IV, and all that through my EMS training, know what to tell the hospital, tell them our ETA. But then again, it just made me say, what we're doing is so important that it's just like, okay, all right, this is another reason for my why.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and that's one that you'll always remember.
Yeah. That was definitely, that sticks with you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's transition a little bit away from EMS.
Okay.
Earlier you said you also have a restaurant.
Yes.
So how did that come up? Was that a side project that became more important, or?
Yeah, never more important than EMS. EMS funded the restaurant. It was like, I tell people real quick, you don't have to be great at a lot of things, right? Be great at one thing and other opportunities will open up for you. So the EMS thing was like, I always tell people, it won't make you rich, but it definitely opens doors, right? So while I was in the EMS world, my cousin called me and he was a chef for 30 years. And you remember when I said I worked for Sprint?
Yeah.
Well, Sprint was in a plaza and Longhorn was right there. And he was the chef at Longhorn.
Okay.
And and this was in Florida.
Yeah.
He moved to Georgia and I remember him calling me like, cuz I got an idea for a restaurant. I was like, no, I'm not interested. You know, like 6 months, because you hear restaurants have like a 5-year lifespan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nah, Marvin, I'm fine. And he literally called me for 6 months. And then I think I told him, look, I'm kind of not going to do this.
Yeah.
And this guy just never gave up. Like I was supposed to have dinner with my attorney, who's a friend of mine. And my cousin goes, hey, cuz, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, you know, you got to get annoyed with the family member, like, what are we doing? He's like, I'm coming over to cook. I was like, oh, okay, free food. I was going to spend money. So I called Bert and I was like, hey, Bert, hey, man, do you mind coming to my house instead of going to dinner? My cousin wants to cook for us. He's like, sure, can I bring my girl? And I was like, yeah, why not?
Like a whole night of
Let's
it.
make it vibe, you know? So my cousin came with his panini grill type bread and he made like 5 different sandwiches and we're like, oh, okay, we got something.
Yeah.
You know, and he had so much faith that he signed a lease with no money.
Wow.
He went to Lenox Mall, which is like the premier mall of Georgia, and had the space already. And I was like, where are we going to do this? He's like, I already got a space. I was like, we cannot do business like this. So now, you know, my business started growing. This is not the right way to do stuff. But when I saw the location, I fell in love with it. And everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but everybody doesn't want to be an entrepreneur. Because a year and a half later, he's like, I can't do this. I'm like, really, bro? But I loved it so much. And we got so many great opportunities from our customers that wanted to franchise. And so I'm like, oh, we have something here. So that's how that came about. We have a gourmet grilled cheese restaurant right next to Bloomingdale's. Yeah, and it's amazing. We're going on 4 years.
Okay, so a little bit of that cheese and things to help get people into the hospital.
Yeah. Like,
supplement your other business.
I like how you think. Yes. Eat this. All my patients. Yes.
Yeah.
That is so evil. That's a good one.
It does
Good
sound
marketing.
great, though.
But it's still customer service, right?
Yes.
So it's like you still have this customer service background where I'm just like, I have to make sure my clients that even come to the restaurant are taken care of. So it's in the same family, just taking care of people. And I tell all my employees, even at the restaurant, so on the EMS, I always tell them just do the right thing, right? Because we know people are coming in that are on medication. They're probably not having the best quality of life. Self-esteem's gone. You know, make sure you understand that if they give you an attitude, be a little bit more compassionate. You know, and in the restaurant, I tell my employees, when someone comes in, they're giving us an opportunity to fix their day. Either fix it or make it better. You never know if somebody's hungry, but they just lost a parent. Treat them as if they coming off of the worst day ever. So there's still that, put somebody above yourself, someone else's needs. So I might change the words differently, but it's still, I want them to understand it's about that person. And we have 15 minutes. And even at the restaurant, it's kind of the same thing. We have 15 minutes to make an impression. And in the ambulance company, I'm like, hey, we have 15 minutes
For one ride.
from one ride to make that person feel better or worse. And so let's embody that principle. And so, yeah, it works.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now you're getting into home health too?
Yes. And so, again, what you touched on is just really not only the ambulance company has a lot of opportunities within itself, it opens the doors to open up other businesses. So what I found out was that when I was dropping my patients home, they would have a CNA there or a nurse there. So I have one patient, of course, I can't say his name. I was like, Mr. B, like, why? Who's that? He's like, oh, that's my nurse. And I'm like, oh, it makes sense, because if they can't walk, and we gave that whole example of if their house caught on fire, they couldn't get out of this wheelchair by themselves, and their wife's working or husband's working, Medicare, Medicaid, or their insurance will pay for a nurse or CNA to take care of their daily living, help them with medication. So then I was like, light bulb went off. I'm going to start my own home health agency, which again, like the EMS, you don't have to be a doctor, right? So home health, you don't have to be an RN. And a lot of people don't realize that when you get into the medical field, if you want to open up a chiropractic office, you don't have to be a chiropractor, right? They're just going to say, you have to have this certification and hire someone who has this.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, I noticed that a lot, even with me starting a pharmacy. It's like, I don't have to be a pharmacist. No, I just have to hire one.
Right.
And that's really what I'm noticing with healthcare. It's like, most of our CEOs of hospitals are not doctors. Right. And so they do probably have a healthcare degree or something of some sort, but they're not necessarily doctors, right? It's like being a coach of a football team. Well, you're my offense coordinator, you're my defense coordinator. Everybody has their own specialties, and I'll oversee everything. But I've never thrown a football in my life. Right?
I feel like for better or for worse, healthcare is still a business. Like it's still run by business people.
Yes. Yeah, because we always have to think of innovative ways to attract the people, right? And healthcare is so simple. You find a need, provide the service.
Right.
Yeah, you're just trying to find a way to provide the service a lot better than the person next to you, or just, add another twist to it. Be innovative. Make it more convenient for the client. And so now it's like, hey, Mr. B, I own a home health, and we transport you. So
We already have that relationship,
right
so we might as well.
It's worked out great. So that's what we've done with that.
Yeah, you say it's easy, but I know that is the differentiator between those who run successful businesses, who are successful entrepreneurs, and people who can't find that need. So, I mean, I'm so impressed at your ability to find something, run at it, and keep going until you are thriving and then find the next thing. Like, that's being a serial entrepreneur and being successful. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not for the weak at heart. Thank you for the compliment, but it's not. Owning an EMS company or any company is not, because you're dealing with personnel, then you're dealing with clients, right? You have those two, somebody's never always happy.
Yeah. I do have another question, though. You mentioned Medicare a lot. So what is your relationship with the insurance company, since a lot of these are, given the nature of what you're running?
Well, you know what people will do, and I noticed that in healthcare, you can find, I'm just going to label it the casual client, right? And then where you're going to find the most success at is your residual clients, right? And so most residual clients are on government insurance. And so most of the times when you look at healthcare, people are going to be successful when they fit a client that has to go to an appointment every other day, rather than the one-time wound care, right? Or, maybe somebody who's just doing a procedure one time. So we focus on clients that like dialysis, that have to go 3 times a week. And for the majority of them are on Medicare. And so your relationship with them is really based on your billing company, whether you're doing it in-house or you hire a separate company.
Okay.
And they're the ones that really are talking with the insurance provider to make sure we get paid on time, or if there's anything that needs to be resubmitted, it gets corrected in a timely manner and gets resubmitted. So that way there's no hiccups on when Medicare is paying us. But when you have everything in order, it's a great thing. You get paid every day outside of weekends. Money's hitting your account every day. If you have systems in place and you have a great billing company or system within your company, then you're loving life.
Yeah.
You're definitely loving life.
Nice.
Yeah. Definitely sounds like a challenging part, but a lucrative part of the equation, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it works. And again, if I knew then what I know now, I would have hired an inside billing company, made them an EMT, and now I'm killing two birds with one stone, right? So I have somebody who could jump on the truck if someone calls out, but they could also make sure that my billing is being done accurately, rather than having a third party, and now you have to make phone calls and wait for that person to get on the phone and see where the hiccup is at. You can find it in your office. So it's one less hand touching the billing process.
Yeah.
So but it works, It
Perfect.
works.
Yeah. So, we've kind of gone through this whole journey. I kind of appreciate everything you've kind of walked us through here. One of the things that we always like to ask at the end is if you could recommend a book or a movie. And, I like to get a little color on, what are the things that make you you. So
This is bad.
either, I'll take either. If you've got both, that's great, but I'll take either.
Look, you guys are going to get personal. Let me see. This is bad because I'm reading The Way of a Superior Man because I'm not married. So I got to figure out what I'm doing. So I'm like, this is bad. I got to recalibrate the way I do things. But that's what I'm reading. It's trying to, what I'm learning from that is just being more understanding. So anytime if you and I disagree, I will approach that conversation not trying to be right, but just trying to understand your point of view. And so it works because it's really about, being in your masculinity and your femininity as a man and understanding or realizing that you're never going to understand a woman and they're like a body of water and it's infinite, right? So it's just being in the moment, but taking what I've learned so far from that book and applying it with, it applies to my employees as well. And it's like, okay, Mr. Hanz, or this is, let's just figure it out. Let's not, well, you were wrong for doing this. My approach is completely different, right? I did a podcast the other day, and it's called It's Giving, right? And she was like, if you were to sum up 2024 and in one word, and she said it has to start with it's giving, right? Yeah. And she said, what would it be? And I said, it's giving awareness. I'm more aware of my surroundings, more aware of how people feel, and I think that's relatable to the book. It's just being aware that you can't solve everything and you don't have to be right at everything. You just have to try to understand because usually just a misunderstanding, right? That's what it comes about. So
yeah, and that's obviously important for personal relationships, but especially for a business like yours where the business relationships are the personal relationships. So
facts. Yeah, definitely. You can't survive unless, that's one thing I tell my mentees, like this thing is so relationship based, your relationships with the social workers, it goes even further than you just getting referrals from them. What if you're late and Josh doesn't like me? And I'm like, hey, Josh, this is Constant Care. We're running late. Oh, you're running late again? We're giving your patient to somebody else. Because I don't have that relationship. But if I like you, like, all right, Hans, don't worry about it. I'll let the patient know. That goes so far. And I've been invited to my patients' birthday parties, funerals, because they look at you as a family member. Like when I say you are an integral part of your community, that is not an understatement. People really do look at you as an important part of how that community functions. And so, again, it's just building relationships is how that works. And building relationships with other ambulance companies. It's just a relationship-based industry. Healthcare people work together. Right? So.
Yeah. Well, Hanz, I really appreciate you being here. I mean, this has been so interesting, and this is so many things I had no idea about. Yeah. So again, thank you so much for coming out and being here today, and hopefully we will see more of you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you.